What's up everybody, ShadowInTheEast here. Today I'm going to be doing a tutorial over the Longsword, as it was requested by somebody. Now I'm going to break this video up into 4 different sections, or 4 main sections, and those 4 sections are going to be A, the 4 different attacks and damage that each attack does, B, the 3 phases of a swing, C, countering, dragging, excels, and ripostes, and then D, I'm going to show you guys some of that stuff in some duels. Now, before I jump into the 4 different sections, I am going to give you guys a little bit of information on the Longsword. Now, the Longsword is only available in the Knights class, more specifically the Officer subclass. It is one of the first 4 weapons that you can use once you first start the game. Now, I like to say that there are 3 different categories of weapons in this game. Besides all the archer shit, I like to say that there are axes, swords, and then blunt weapons. The main takeaway from that is that because it's a sword, whenever you do basic attacks and heavy attacks, your sword will go through people, so that way you can hit multiple targets at once. Blunt weapons do not work that way. Axes work the same way as swords, but blunt weapons do not. So if you do a basic attack with a blunt weapon, like a mace, it will not go through your enemy. It'll just stop on contact. If you do a heavy attack, though, it will go through your enemy. And that rule applies to the main 3 attacks that there are, which is the slash, overhead, and stab. Now, one of the first things you'll notice when you open up the Change a Class tab and you're looking at all the different weapons and different classes and shit is you'll see this little stat graph right here that shows reach, speed, damage, and cut. That little graph right there is kind of bullshit to me because, I mean, it doesn't seem accurate. Now, I'll touch up on why I say that a little later in the video. But anyway, let's go ahead and jump into the first section, which is the 4 different attacks and damage. So the 4 different attacks that there are the slash, the overhead, the stab, and then your special. Now on top of those 4 attacks, each attack besides the special has a heavy version. So you have a heavy slash, then you have your heavy overhead, and then you have your heavy stab. Now as you saw there, the heavy attacks are much slower than the basic attacks. However, the heavy attacks do far more damage than the basic attacks do. Now real quick, I'm going to go ahead and show you guys the damage amounts for each attack. So if you do a basic slash, let's do it on this guy right here, you'll see that it does 40 damage. If you do a heavy slash, you'll see that it does 60 damage. If you do a basic overhead, it does 50 damage. If you do a heavy overhead, it does 70 damage. If you do a basic stab, it does 55 damage, and then if you do a heavy stab, it does 65 damage. Now, of all your basic attacks, your basic stab is going to do the most damage at 55, and then of all your heavy attacks, your overhead is going to do the most damage at 70. Now, your least amount of damage is going to come from your basic slash, which will be 40, and then your least amount of damage that will come from one of your heavy attacks is going to come from your slash again, which is at 60. Now, I'm going to go ahead and show you guys the special real fast. If you see the special, it does 80 damage. So your special does the most damage out of all your attacks. Now there's one more thing worth mentioning, and that is jabbing and kicking. That's not really weapon specific. Each weapon will do the same amount of damage on a jab, and each kick will always do the same amount of damage. And as you'll see right here, jab does 10 damage, while a kick, a kick will always do 5 damage. Now you'll also notice on the Knights class that you have the option to do a tackle, and when you do a tackle, it does 20 damage. That is not specific to the Longsword. I'm almost positive you will always do 20 damage unless you have a shield or something. Now your stab is always going to have the most reach of all your attacks with the Longsword, followed by your slash and then your overhead. So if you guys take a look right here, you'll see that whenever I do a stab, I can hit the wall from this far away, but if I do my slash, I won't make contact with the wall, and if I do my overhead, I still won't make contact with the wall. Now if I move up a little bit, I will make contact with my slash, and if I do my overhead, I still won't make contact. Anyway guys, so for our next section, we're going to be talking about the 3 phases of a swing with the Longsword. So the 3 different phases to a swing are going to be the windup, the release, and then the recovery phase. All of which have different times, which I'm going to go over each of those right now. Now your windup phase starts whenever you press your button to swing, and it ends right before your weapon goes into the release phase. Now for a basic slash with a Longsword, the wind-up phase takes 225 milliseconds. Now for a heavy attack, the wind-up phase takes 575 milliseconds. For your overhead, it's going to take 200 milliseconds, and for a heavy overhead, it's going to take 550 milliseconds. The basic stab takes 275 milliseconds, and the heavy stab takes 625 milliseconds. Now your special's wind-up phase takes 850 milliseconds. So now on to the release phases. Now, it doesn't matter if you do a basic attack or a heavy attack, the release phase will always be the same amount of time. So your basic slash and your heavy slash have a release phase time of 475 milliseconds. Then you have your overhead, which has a release phase time of 450 milliseconds for the heavy and the basic. And then you have your stab release phase time, which is going to be 400 milliseconds for the basic and for the heavy. And then, of course, you have your special release phase time, which is going to be slower than all the others at 500 milliseconds. Now, your release phase is going to take place between when your weapon starts going forward to when your weapon reaches about halfway through with its swing. Now, I could be wrong about that, but the only reason I'm saying it is because of drags and excels, which is what we'll get to in the next section. And then at the very end, you have your recovery phase. And just like the release phase, the heavy and basic attacks are going to have the same recovery time. So for your slash, you're going to have a recovery time of 800 milliseconds. For your overhead, you're also going to have a recovery time of 800 milliseconds. And then for your stab, you're also going to have a recovery time of 800 milliseconds. Now, your special is what takes the longest to recover from, and it's going to take 1.2 seconds. Now, your recovery phase is the window from which your swing is ending to the point at which you can do another action like jab, put up your block, or kick. Alright, so all that in mind, that brings us to our next section, which is over countering, drags, excels, and ripostes. Now I'm going to go ahead and start talking about ripostes, since we just got done talking about recovery times. So a riposte is going to be that moment where when somebody swings at you and you block their attack, you have a little window where you can swing faster. Just like that right there. You're going to see that little yellow ring appear around your shield, letting you know that you can do a riposte. Now, it only lasts for a fraction of a second, so you do have to be quick. See how fast it goes away? And you can do a riposte with any of the attacks, you just cannot do a riposte with your special. Now, the riposte is essentially just going to speed up your wind-up phase. It won't really do anything for your release or recovery phases. However, you can change your recovery phase. Now, there are two ways to speed up your recovery time, and the first way is to get a hit on somebody, make contact. So, for example, if I miss my swing on this guy behind me right here, and I try to put up my block immediately, look at how long it takes. Now, if I get a hit on him immediately, watch it how fast I can put it up. I can put it up almost immediately. Now, the other way besides making contact with people is that you can make contact with, the ground or a wall, or just make contact with anything. Now, again, if I swing at the air, it takes me forever to get that block put up, but if I swing at something like this wall right here, I'm able to put it up almost immediately as soon as I make contact. Now, that being said, stamina is a big part of this game. So if you look at my stamina down there real fast, whenever I do a basic attack, you'll see that if I do just one, it won't use any stamina, and that could be for a stab, an overhead, or a slash. Now, if I try comboing, you'll see it'll start slowly using my stamina. And, of course, if you do heavy attacks, it uses more stamina. Now, you've probably noticed that little dark yellow bar as well, next to the main bar. And that is how much stamina you can get back if you make contact with an opponent. So, for example, I'll lose a little bit of stamina real fast. Watch me take a swing at this guy. See how my bar fills up immediately? And it works even if they're blocking, or even if you just get a hit on their body, just like that. Stamina, however, will not come back if you hit something like the floor. You'll actually lose more stamina. Now, you'll also notice that whenever you hold down your block button, you slowly lose stamina over time, which is not good. And what's even worse is if you hold your block button and somebody makes contact with you, you lose even more stamina. A lot more, just like that. So that's where countering comes in. Countering is very important to save your stamina. Now, to do a counter, all you need to do is go from a blocking state to a swinging state. And that can be a counter slash, a counter stab, or a counter overhead. Now, you'll notice, because I didn't hit anybody, I didn't gain any stamina there. But if I do a counter on my opponent here, I'm going to wait for him to do another swing real fast. You'll notice that my stamina comes back immediately. And of course, you can do heavy counters. So you have a heavy counter overhead, your heavy counter slash, and a heavy counter stab. So with regular counters like those, you also have counter feinting. So if your opponent goes for a feint, which is whenever you start one attack and do another. So for example, let's say I do a slash and then I go into a stab like I did right there. Now you can also do overheads into slashes, stabs into slashes, overheads into stabs, stabs into overheads, and then of course slashes into stabs and slashes into overheads. But there's another feature to feinting called counter feinting. So if your opponent decides to do a feint on you, let's say they do a slash into a stab, what you can do is you can do a counter slash into a counter stab. And all you have to do is, of course, be in your blocking state, and then you have to hit your counter button first, and then whatever attack that they do next, or whatever attack they switch to, you simply just press the next attack button. Now you only have the time in your wind-up window to do a feint. So once your release starts, you cannot do a feint. You can't change your attack. Now there's another way in which you can counter, and it's what I like to call a double slash or a double overhead or a double stab counter. And instead of having to do like a counter feint where you go into a different attack, you can do like a double slash. So for example, you can start one counter slash and then do another. Or you can do one counter stab and then do another. Or one counter overhead and into another. However, you can't just go from a blocking state into a counter slash and then into another slash. You actually have to be in your blocking state and then do your slash, then hit your block button again and hit your slash button at the same time if you want to do a double slash. Same goes for the overhead and the double stab. So to do your second counter slash, you pretty much have to press the block button and the slash button at the same time. Same goes for the double stab and the double overhead. Now I know that's how it works on console. I play on console. I'm not so sure if it's the same for PC, so if somebody would like to let me know in the comments, that would be great. Now since the longsword is a faster weapon, you are going to have smaller windows to do counters. So you can't wait, you know, for a good solid minute and then decide to go into a counter slash. I don't know if you guys know, but you can also change the direction from which your swing comes from. So if I press L3 on my controller, I can actually swing from my left to the right first, instead of having to do from right to left. Now, if you press L3, and again, I don't know what the button is for PC, but if you press L3 on console or PlayStation, and you decide to do a double counter slash, this is what it looks like. Alrighty guys, I'm going to go ahead and cover accels and drags next. Now, if you've played the actual in-game tutorial before, you'll know that whenever you look in the direction of where your swing is going, you're going to hit your opponent sooner, which is what's called an accel. If you do the opposite, and you look in the direction of where your swing is coming from, you're going to do what's called a drag, which is whenever you hit your opponent later, like this. I'll give you guys a better example of a good accel and a good drag. So here's a good accel. Hit him really early, and then here's a good drag. I'll give you guys an example of an accel overhead real fast. So if you just look down to the ground and you crouch, it'll make you swing faster into your opponent. And then if you look up, that would be an example of a drag overhead. Now I'm not sure about stabs. I mean, I guess for an accel, you could really just move into your opponent. That would make you hit them faster. And then I guess if you're further away from your opponent, you'll hit them later. You could also do heavy attacks. So for example, like this one right here, where you don't actually stab for your opponent, you kind of move your sword into them. Like that. Anyway, because the longsword is so fast, it's going to be more beneficial to do accels with your basic slashes and overheads. And then for drags, it'll be more beneficial for you to do with the slash. The overhead can be good too for drags, but the slash will just have better results. Now it's also important to notice that drags and accels are only going to affect your release time. So if you do a drag, your release time is going to be longer, meaning you'll hit your opponent later, and then if you do an accel, your release time will be sooner, technically, and you'll hit your opponent sooner. Yeah, there's not too much to drags and accels for the longsword. I mean, it's already a fast weapon, so drags aren't going to be the best. Accels are going to look crazy fast to your opponent. Yeah, so when you throw your weapons, it also does damage. So let's see how much the longsword does. So minus 25 if it's in the legs or in the arms. So you get 37 out of it. And then if you throw it in the body, it's 50. And for headshot damage, we got a plus 25%, so that gives us 62 with the longsword. Nice. Now, real quick, I'm going to show you guys why I think that the stat graph is bullshit. So if you look at it, look at where the longsword damage is. Now remember that a slash does 40 damage, a basic slash. Now check this out. I have a dagger in my hand right now. This is not a knight's weapon. It's a vanguard weapon, but I picked it up off of one of these guys. Check out how much damage it says that the dagger does. Look at that. Now watch what happens whenever I go up and hit somebody with a slash. Let's hit this guy right here. 30 damage. So it only does 10 damage less than the longsword on a slash. But if you look at the fucking line, I mean, the line's practically a dot, dude. I mean, it should be at least more than half of what the longsword damage is on the graph. So that's why I say don't trust that shit, because that's just not right. There's just no way. Alrighty, guys, I think that's about it. I showed you guys some longsword basics, as well as some stats. I also showed you guys some fighting basics as well. I feel like that's a good thing to include since it's my first tutorial video ever. So if I make any more weapon tutorial videos, people can reference this just for fighting if they need to. Anyway, guys, I'm going to go ahead and show you a duel real fast. Alrighty, guys, I think that does it for this longsword tutorial video. I have never made a tutorial over anything in this game, so let me know how y'all think I did, especially you intermediate and veteran players that know your shit. Let me know if there's anything that I missed or if there's anything I should have touched on more or less. At the end of this video, whenever my outro plays, there's going to be 2 video options. I'll go ahead and link longsword skills as one of the videos that you guys can watch. It's basically just me dueling with the longsword and showing off my skills. So if you guys want to go watch some good fights with the longsword and you want to, I don't know, learn some moves, go check it out. Skill in this game is really all about reaction time, and the only way you're going to get good at this game is by seeing this stuff and by fighting people and getting your ass kicked. You know, as you play, your reaction speed will get a lot better, and especially as you play against different people who, you know, use different moves and they use different weapons of different speeds. Especially the fast weapons. The fast weapons will really get your reaction time better. But that's really all it is. And ping. Ping, of course, is always something to watch out for. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like. And if you're new to the channel, subscribe so you can watch me get better at making tutorials. Again, thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.